Are there breaks or music or any of that kind of stuff?
For authors, filmmakers, entertainment, and all your listening needs. Listen now to Talk Now Radio, where no topic is taboo.
Pardon me, folks. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Talk Now Radio. This is your host, Royce the Redneck Radio Man. And joining me today is going to be Margaret De Wys, and I'm assuming I'm pronouncing that correctly. If not, I'm pretty sure she's going to correct me here in just a minute. Before we get too far involved in this, let me remind everybody, if you got any questions, you can call in at 832-632-7904. You can also ask questions in the chat room, and I'll pick them up and ask them for you. And would like to remind everybody this is only going to be an hour-long show, so I'm not anticipating any breaks unless something comes up that a break might be necessary. But usually on the 1-hour shows, I don't have one. And also like to remind everybody that Talk Now Radio is listener-supported radio. And with the help of the listeners, we can avoid having sponsors that can say, well, I don't like what you're broadcasting today. I want to pull out if you don't take it down, type of mentality, because a lot of the news that I bring and the guests that I have on here, well, sometimes the subject just don't agree with everybody that's in there making the big bucks. So I just wanted to put that past everybody and remind you. And also, if you want to learn more about Margaret, her website's www.blacksmokethebook.com. And when you go to that URL, it's going to open up a page that has 2 pictures on it, one to her book, Black Smoke, and the other one to her book, Ecstatic Healing, which is the one that I really contacted her to talk to tonight on the show on. But I do plan to probably have her, tell us a little something about Black Smoke as well. As long as she's here, we might as well get a little bit about both of them out there. So, Margaret, am I pronouncing your name correctly?
Absolutely. Thank you
Wonderful.
very much. That's an amazing feat right there. Yes. Good for you. Royce, huh?
Yeah, I tell most people Rolls Royce, top quality.
Yeah, that's the best way to go. So I hear.
So, you want to give us a little idea what motivated you to write this book?
Ecstatic Healing. Well, yeah. In 1999, I was diagnosed with cancer and basically was in crisis mode. And I'm a composer, or I was a composer by profession, and I was doing pieces in Europe and in the United States. The doctors were telling me, do this, do that, do the other thing, and I said, no, I'm going to go to Guatemala because there was a gathering of over 500 healers from North and South America that were gathering for a special Mayan Choltun, which was 13 years before 2012. I was lucky enough to be able to go. I was one of the few white people. Someone from every race had to be there. And I imagined within those 500 healers I would find someone to heal me. So lo and behold, I ended up in the Amazon jungle, working with a Shuar healer in the high upper Amazon with ayahuasca and other plant medicines, because he said he could see inside my body, and he said he could cure me if I came into the jungles of Ecuador. So off I went. From that moment forward, I've been working with healers all over the world, and that includes Africa, Asia, and South America, and North America primarily. And the ecstatic healing came about as, well, you kind of have to know what happens in Black Smoke, which I'm not going to tell you because people are going to want to read what happens to the healer who ends up coming to the United States and Canada to work with Native people who were very sick. We went up there. So as he was stuck in Canada for several years, I started going down to Brazil and Africa. And the book, Ecstatic Healing, is about working with healers who have spirits come into their bodies to heal people. And you know what the first chapter is, right? About when I touched the beads.
You touched the bees?
In the
okay.
beginning.
Yeah, okay. Are you talking about this bee sting healing thing where they sting you and the venom is actually a part of the cure?
No. In the beginning of Ecstatic Healing, the way that the book opens is it's 1992 or something like that, and I'm at a friend's house. She says, "Come over. I want you to meet this guy. He's been all over the world. He's the real deal. He's a shaman. He's worked with people in Asia and all these places." I said, "Okay, I'll go over." There were about 15 people there, and he started a ritual. He had a table on the side with objects that he asked us not to touch because they were holy. He started singing, and at one point he picked up a white necklace, a beaded necklace, and he passed it from person to person as he was singing. And the minute the necklace got to me, I started convulsing and spewing spit from my mouth, and my eyeballs bulged. There was this huge charge of electricity or some kind of power going through my body. And the healer said, "Hold on to the energy, hold on to it." And we were flying around the room, locked in this embrace with this necklace. And when it was over, I was in shock. Like, what had happened to me? It hadn't happened to anyone else. And I went to him, and he said, that happened to me when I touched black elk's rattle. I started shaking and convulsing. I went onto the ground, and I was unconscious. And I said, "But what is that? What is that? Where did that necklace come from?" He said it came from the highest priest of the Zulus, High Sanusi Vusamazulu Credo Mutwa. And this was his necklace that he placed on me to become a sangoma, which is their healers and shamans, basically. That evening, Credo Mutwa came to me in a vision, and he told me to come to South Africa. So that's how the book begins. But I make a detour to Brazil to work with two healers there for several years before I end up going to South Africa. So the title of the book, Ecstatic Healing, has to do with people that are in possessed states, that are in an ecstatic state, that are doing spectacular and miraculous healings. So I felt like I wanted to write about this type of healing, and it's just so kind of different than the Amazonian healing that I had been put through to be healed. It turns out that all of the people that I've worked with in all of the books I'm still in contact with, and I still work with them. But I keep, I guess you could say, adding on other people in the mix. So I'm continuously learning about the spirit world and healing in particular.
Wow. It sounds like this here particular kind of healing is, it's a lot more powerful than Reiki healing.
There are very powerful healers on the planet. One of the people in Ecstatic Healing that I started working with, John of God, in 2001. And so he's, right after basically the story with the beads, I talk about how I get to Brazil and what I end up doing there. And so I've been with Josie Ravenwing for years on and off, helping her with groups that go down there, and I work with him when he comes to the United States. And I have seen miraculous healings. They're talked about in the book. One instance, it's very interesting because some healings can happen instantaneously and others take years. And so if you don't mind, I'd like to tell you one of the instantaneous healings that I saw there.
Oh, that'd be wonderful.
Okay. There was this guy, Norman, I'll call him, who came down and he needed a hip replacement. He was a New Yorker. He was about 60-something. And I said, well, so, yeah, tell me what you felt when you went, because basically people line up. There's hundreds of people at the casa, and you move by João within a second, and you're gone. You know, it's not this personal one-on-one healing. And I said, so, Norm, what happened? He goes, I got up to João, and he said, move on, you're healed. And he said, all of a sudden I had no pain in my leg. I walked out the door normally. I went back to New York. 2 weeks later, I had an MRI, and the doctors found that my hip was completely healed, and I needed no surgery or work whatsoever. Then I saw him 2 months later in Brazil, and he was running up hills, and he had his cousins, aunts, and all sorts of people. But, you know, it's spectacular to see, for instance, a child that's 5 or 6 years of age, and João, who's in a spirit form and that they call an entity, will say to the child, stand up. And the child grabs onto the wheelchair arms and stands, and the entity says, walk. And the child, 1 foot after another, begins to walk. And the parents are crying. They're in an unbelievable state of mind because their child has never been able to walk before. That's what I'm talking about. There are great healers. There are world healers. They're so connected to the spirit world that really there's the connection between their physical body and what they're able to do and what their mission is to do healing is profound. And I've certainly witnessed this in many countries, and every time I don't ever get bored with it. It's always, perhaps it isn't really a miracle. It's a miracle in the sense of how we define what miracle is. But it's just a glorious, glorious, glorious event.
So these people, they have regular meetings about these, for the purpose of meeting people and healing them?
Yes. Well, in João's case, he has a place called the Casa de Dominacio, and that is in the middle of Brazil, about an hour and a half from Brasilia. And it's a small place that has the main meeting room. So hundreds of people will fly in now because of Oprah and several other people. He's world famous. And they'll go to small hotels, and on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, they'll line up and go into the main room. And he, when we were in Atlanta, we saw 2,500 people a day.
That's a lot of people.
Tell me about it.
I mean, a lot of your UFO meetings only get like 200, maybe 300 people, so to get that many is pretty breathtaking.
Well, I mean, he's worked on, and I don't know how many tens of thousands of people he's healed, but he's worked on well over 1 million people. And he's an entity form, so he doesn't remember anything about you when he's in that state. He also does something where he'll do physical operations on people, and he'll bring them to the front of the room, take a knife, cut into their chest or their stomach, do an appendectomy. The person has no anesthesia or, antiseptic things. There's very little blood. He makes a couple of stitches, and the person goes back to their hotel room to recuperate. And it's very gruesome to see these operations, but it's amazing, and there are a lot of doctors down there that come to witness it.
Okay, so these are the ones that come to witness this. They're regular doctors from like the hospital?
Yes, absolutely. They come from Europe. They come from the United States. A doctor that's interested in this kind of healing, along with the medical healing, they're down there. There's been a lot of filming that's gone on down there. And
so they're trying to do a documentary on it we can see soon?
Oh, there's several out now already. Let's see, Discovery Channel, Channel 4 from the BBC. Oprah did, I think, 2 segments on him. ABC Primetime, it's endless. It's a lot. I think you can, I don't know if they show them on YouTube or how one gets to see
So
them.
Oprah Winfrey's kind of more or less endorsed the guy.
She went down there and took her people and her camera crew. Yeah, absolutely. He's a big deal. He's loving. I mean, can you imagine spending so many days of your life where you're not aware of anything, you're basically knocked out of your body like you're asleep, healing people. And he's been doing it for 50-some years.
And it doesn't take a lot out of them to do it?
Actually, yes, it does. Because when you take in very powerful energies in the body, it wears on you. For instance, sometime he was in Recife, and he was doing healings, and he fell down. He had half of his body paralyzed. This was about 15, 20 years ago. He was rushed to the hospital. They hooked him up to EEGs and all these machines, all of which kind of poofed and exploded. They couldn't put anything electrical on him. And he decided that he couldn't stand the hospital anymore, and he went home. And a few months at home, he said to his wife, I can't take this anymore. I have to do the healings. So he went in front of people, and when he was in the entity form, when the spirit form, his body worked perfectly. He had a stroke. So at one point during a healing, the entity said, our brother João has been healing everyone. We are going to heal him now. And João took a scalpel. He cut into his chest, opened his chest, stuck his hand in, and pulled out a blood clot from his heart. And then he sewed himself up. After that happened, he has not been paralyzed. So there were at least 10,000 people that saw this. There are pictures, there's a lot of documentation. And basically, I'm saying this, I'm not saying this through Joao's mouth, but when a huge energy comes into you, it's very hard for the body to take. In earlier years, when he was younger, he would incorporate, that's what it means to take in a spirit, the spirit of King Solomon. And now, his body at 68 or whatever he is can't really hold that energy because it's too explosive for his physical body at his age. So there have been occasions where Solomon would come in for a second or two, but I think that that's rare or not happening anymore.
Of course, now, King Solomon was not exactly noted as a healer so much as a wise ruler, but does he serve another purpose when he does enter somebody else's body?
Yes, he does. No, the purpose is to heal. I used to have videotapes, the real videotapes, and they got demagnetized, but there was one where he had incorporated King Solomon, and it was awesome. This guy had this big, big, big abscess on his leg, and King Solomon just took his mouth and put it over the abscess, this open wound, and sucked everything out. And so it's interesting that Solomon is doing, or was doing, some of the healings. I mean, Don Ignacio, or St. Ignatius, works with him. There are lots of doctors that were real medical doctors in the past that work with him. There's tons of spirits that only go into his body and only do healing through him. So the book opens up with the beads, and then we go to João, who's, people have said he's the greatest healer since Jesus. These are quotations. And at that time, as I was in Brazil, I started working with the Orisha tradition, which is the African tradition, mostly from West Africa, to bring in the gods and goddesses of Africa. They're called the Orishas. And so there's a big section in the book about the Orishas and how spirit possession feels, because at this point I start becoming possessed by different beings. And so this is really, the book is my story of the healers in Brazil. And
kind of like a journal of everything you've been doing.
Well, it's more than a journal, because it informs a lot of people that might have some of these experiences or want to know more. There's a lot of teaching in it, but it is, in some ways, a journal, yes, because it's journaling my journey, working with healers.
Okay, sounds pretty interesting. Now, I'm going to be honest with you, and as much as I did get a copy of your book, however, the problem I had was I'm like 20 books behind on reading from bouncing in and out of the hospital so much, and I had to get you up on the air pretty soon, but I didn't have a chance to actually read the whole thing, and I do apologize for that.
No apology necessary. But, maybe we're going to get you down to see João. Get you fixed up if you have anything going on. If you were recently in the hospital, hopefully, things are worked out. But, yes, there's some really incredible healers out there, and they don't work necessarily they don't work anything like what our allopathic doctors do, but they don't require that you not continue whatever your doctor says.
Right.
Until you actually get better. And, for instance, like when I was down there, one of the women on the trip was a diabetic, and she was taking insulin. And he cured her, and she shot her insulin into her and almost died because she had too much insulin in her system. You see, so there's a certain point where you realize, hey, my blood sugar is okay, so I can't take my usual dose. In her case, it could have been fatal. But for the most part, you stay with the doctor's prescription if you're with a doctor, and then you get the healing, and there's been a lot of cures.
Well, right now I'm doing good to pay my light bill, much less to travel, but who knows if they're ever coming to Houston to have a meeting, maybe they can look me up.
Yeah, that would be a good place for him to come.
Well, God knows there's a whole city full of sick people here. I mean to tell you, it don't seem no matter which hospital you're going to, Meitner, almost every one of them, has like 3 to 6 hour waiting out in the emergency room, waiting to be seen.
It's tragic. I mean, the health of our people, okay, in the United States is tragic. There's so much pain and suffering. And if we can help anybody, let's do it. All right?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that the medical industry and the pharmaceutical industry probably make more in the United States than they do anywhere else in the country, and it just pays more to treat symptoms than it does to find cures, in other words.
That's actually an absolute fact. It's better to have a lot of cancer patients than to get them cured, because you don't make any money curing somebody.
Yeah, and let's face it, my brother-in-law Jerry died with cancer, and they were pumping chemo into him at $10,000 a bag.
Right.
And I'm like, oh my God. Hope they don't plan to get their money, because I wouldn't pay it. But on the other hand, if your brother had also something else helping him,
I don't really want to talk about chemotherapy because what I say on the air is not going to be very positive, and some people need it, okay? And they do well with it. But for the most part, it's very tricky when you're sick, and they're telling you this and that, and you've got to have this happen and that happen, and some of the drugs they give you make some other symptom really bad coming to you. It's hard. It's definitely hard.
Yeah, it is. And yeah, you know, I sit here and I watch commercials every night. You can't miss them if you're going to watch TV for different medicines. And I swear, you'll be taking medicine for something that ain't going to kill you if you leave it alone. It just don't feel good, but the medicine might kill you.
True enough. And, yeah, we've all have personal experience with that, either with ourselves or loved ones. I'm afraid that that's the fact. I mean, we don't even, everybody can just, if there's people listening on the show, they're going to hear, hey, yeah, my Aunt Sue or somebody like that. It's just a fact, They all come with side effects because it's not natural for the body. Sometimes we need a little push and some help, but not always.
Right. So, I take it then Africa's not the only place you traveled to.
True enough. Yeah. So the last part of the book, I finally go to meet the high priest of the Zulus, and I stay with him. I went to him a few times, and he teaches me more and more and more about healing, and the same kind of energy that came to me in the beginning of the book happens to me there when I'm doing a healing on an African woman. It was a spontaneous healing, and it's a very powerful thing. It was powerful for me because I was in a trance, so I didn't even know that I was going to do it. There was no, it was a completely spontaneous act, and some kind of amazing things happened with where I was working on her, this big, kind of like boil that was at least 2 inches or 3 inches big, popped up off her back from where I was sucking out energy. And so Credo Mutwa, one of the reasons that I go there is because of the necklace, and I know that he has something to tell me. And one of the most extraordinary things he says to me during one of our sessions is he says cancer is afraid of ecstasy. Cancer is like a hungry beast or a spider. It feeds on fear. And it's not the cancer that kills the person. It's
the depression?
The fear. Yeah, well, fear and depression are similar. And I don't have a copy of my own book because I would read a paragraph or two out of it. Isn't that silly? I guess I gave them all away, and I'll have to get myself a copy. Yeah, and I spent some time in Nigeria, Zimbabwe, Botswana, Egypt. Yeah, I'm very, very close to Nigeria. I really, really love that country. That's an important place for me. And then a lot of places that I've gone, I've never written anything about them, but they exist. When I was in Egypt, I worked with the Czar, and I don't know any Arabic. But I said to my friend, she said, let's go to Egypt. I said, I don't need to go to Egypt. Only if I can do ceremony. So she said, okay, well, I have a friend who's an Egyptian sociologist. We'll ask her. And so, lo and behold, she came up with people, and I was invited to be kind of introduced and looked at by a number of trance healers in Egypt. and they agreed to allow me to come to their ceremonies, which I did. And I was taken there by a doctor of all things, and left in this kind of like place. I'd never be able to get out of there again or find it, because it was these little alleyways that go deeper and deeper and deeper. Because in Islam, it's against the law to work with spirits, as it is pretty much in Christianity. I mean, the Christian churches and the Catholics don't want you to do that either. So I spent the night with these amazing Egyptians, went into trance and saw them do healing ceremonies. And they would talk to me, and I would ask them to write it down so the next day I could find out what they were telling me. There was no communication at all, with language, but it was extraordinary. Sounds
pretty extraordinary. And I know most churches would tell you if you're using any kind of spirit healing that you're probably working with demons. Of course, that's just a assumption, and a fear-based assumption, but that's pretty much where they go.
Yes, that's true. And I think all of the major religions, it's forbidden. You shouldn't mess with that, okay? It's just part of, it has nothing to do with Islam or Christianity or Judaism. Although I think the Tibetan Buddhists, they're much more into working with spirits for healing and for many other things. But
I would think some of your Egyptians would be as well, wouldn't they?
Yes, but again, people that work in the healing arts of the nature that I'm speaking about is pretty much a small amount of people that dedicate their lives to it. And, nobody really cares. But if you were shoving this into the face of the Egyptian government, then they would have to do something about it, because most of the people are Islamic or Muslim. So, but these are natural ways of healing that have been, go back 50, 60,000 years ago, if not more. And one of the reasons that I went because I was sick, but the other thing is when I got there, I realized that the people were getting old. The young children or the sons and daughters did not want to follow in the healer's footsteps, and the tradition was all oral. We're talking about encyclopedic knowledge in one person's head that was not going to get passed on. So for me, I felt it was highly important to
put it in written format.
Yeah, so both of my books, Black Smoke and Ecstatic Healing, do talk about these traditions. And, I mean, there's certain things, that I even do now for people that I learned in the jungle, that work, okay? They work really well, and nobody would think of it in a million years. And the other thing that I found is that in being in different countries, certain elements, for instance, in South Africa, of purification and initiation rituals were pretty much almost exact as what they did in the high jungles of the Amazon. And I was like, wow.
Yeah, wow. I read that in Egypt, for example, the priests had to go in there and bathe before they actually performed any services.
That's right. And, I do a lot of my own work here in New York, and I have to do a lot of bathing, okay? Yeah, it's true. It has to be done. And who told you that? How'd you find that out?
Well, I'm trying to remember which book it was. I want to say it was by Gloria Taylor Brown, Invoking the Scribes of Egypt, if I'm not mistaken. It was in that book. is one of the books that I did get to find time to read. But actually her book was fortunate. It came in at the same time, right before I was starting to get behind. And it was, in fact, amongst a bunch of books that got me behind, because I got like 8 of them in one shipment from different authors. Different books, and I was like 8 books behind in one 5-minute sitting there, you know.
Hey, guess what? You're getting free books. Hey, think about that. That's good news.
Yeah, it is, and I do enjoy reading them. I just wish I had more time in a day to read them.
True enough.
But I do the best I can what I have got. But I do have a little something I could talk to you about later on, and that is if you like the way this show's going, I also do a show every Thursday on Revolution Radio. And that show's got about roughly close to 1 million listeners at any given moment because it's a 24-hour show. It don't just air certain times like mine. They've got like 60 hosts over there where I'm, you know, over here by myself. So I get a lot of archive traffic and they get a lot of live traffic, in other words.
Oh, okay.
And I was going to say I can set you up for a show over there in July or August, which would give me the time to finish your book.
Okay. That's so cute.
That's if you're interested in doing a show a couple months down the road.
Absolutely. I might be traveling a little bit in that period. It usually happens pretty spontaneously for me.
Okay.
So, but yeah, I'd like to. That'd be nice.
Well, I get to call about 40 countries around the world on my Skype subscription, so there's a good chance wherever you're at, I can get through as long as you got a number. And if you can get to a computer.
And electricity.
Oh, and you wouldn't have a computer. You'll be out in the wilds, won't you?
I don't know. Sometimes I am, but I try to take my computer if I think it's going to, I'm going to be able to plug it in. Yeah, I do take it.
Maybe you ought to get you your own little solar panel you can travel with you.
Oh, I thought about that for a while. Actually, when I was in the jungles, like in 2000, I'd be high up on a mountain, and I had this little thing called a alpha something or another, and I could type with it. It used one AA battery, and I could type 80 pages. But so there was no electricity, there was no toilets, there was no running water, that kind of thing. And I talk about that in my book, Black Smoke. Yeah, so Black Smoke was that was a huge journey too.
Yeah, I was just fixing to ask you if you could share a little something with us about Black Smoke without giving away too much, in other words.
Yeah, well, for instance, it just came out in paperback about a week ago, and it's called Black Smoke Healing and Ayahuasca Shamanism in the Amazon. It begins, well, basically, once I was in Guatemala and these healers, I didn't tell anybody I was sick, so the healers from the Andes and from Alaska and Tierra del Fuego, all these places, the Mayans, the Cubans, were walking around, and I would look at a certain person and I'd say, I'm sure that person could heal me. But I was like, let me wait and see what happens. And so this Amazonian Indian in full regalia, which was toucan feathers, the crown of toucan feathers, and bones and beads over his chest, barefoot, came up to me, and he said, I can see inside your body. It's like I'm looking through glass, and I see your organs, I see your veins, I see inside your cells, and I see that you're sick. You have black smoke in your chest. And I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And he said, if you come to Ecuador, to the jungles, I will heal you. So I said, this is my healer. I'm going. I went back to New York to my husband and daughter and friends and family, and I said, I'm going to the Amazon jungle in Ecuador to get healed. And they said, what? Are you crazy? Are you out of your mind? What about what the doctors are saying and this and that? So,
you were like, what about it?
well, I mean, I was at a point. Well, actually, the way I found out that I was sick is I kept having this dream, and this, I think it's mentioned in the book, where this little guy keeps coming to me, and he's pointing to my breast. He said, "You're sick. Go to a doctor. You're sick. You're sick right there." And that went on for some months, and that dream bothered me like crazy. But me go to a doctor? No, I don't think so. So eventually I went, and yep, that's exactly where I was sick. And when I was in Ecuador, then that's when the real intensity begins, because Carlos, that's his name in the book, picks me up at the airport, and there are like 3 or 4 guys with him, in this car, and they're looking like, backyard gangsters, or you know what. They were talking in Schwa and Quechua and Spanish, Swarthy. I'm like, oh shit, I got myself over here. Now what's going to happen, right? And they take me to this place high on a mountaintop, 11,000 feet or something, and they say, go to bed. Here it's 2 a.m. We'll pick you up at 6. And when is the healing going to start? Don't worry about it, right? And they pick me up. We're in this bus, and we're on these narrow paths where you can see down to the bottom of these cliffs. And you see a lot of dead buses down there and cars, because things just slide off these mountain passes. Then we get to Puyo, and we pull in, and we end up in the outskirts of the jungle where no truck can pass. And it's, midnight or something like that. Everybody's got to get out with their backpacks and start walking in the jungle.
And, of course, nobody wants to do that.
Well, I'm the only white girl, and these are all Indians, basically, warriors.
Oh, okay.
All right, so I'm walking with a bunch of warriors, and it goes on and on and on, and we're on these narrow paths, and we've got flashlights. We can't see anything, okay? And Carlos is like, oh, I got to go back. Something happened to somebody. And so he runs away, and I'm like, hey, wait a minute. I don't know these other people. And I'm, it's like 1 o'clock in the morning, and I'm walking with these warriors who I don't know to somewhere deep in the jungle. It was like really crazy. So eventually we get to this tiny village, and Carlos is there, and he says, hey, I thought so-and-so got attacked by a crocodile, and I had to go back and find him, but he's okay. So the next morning when I get up, I'm looking at this path that's coming into this place, and on either side of this path are lagoons with dozens of crocodiles.
Ooh.
And that's what I'd walked through the night before, okay? Hey, that's the beginning of what was going on in the jungle. The next step is my initiations and purifications. And one of them was not to eat, and we were standing around outside, and I see, 4 or 5 Ecuadorians over a 55-gallon drum, and they're drinking this stuff, and they're all vomiting. And I'm like, oh my God, what's going on here? And so Carlos says to me, okay, you're going to drink 11 cups of this and vomit. And I said, you got to be out of your mind. There's no way you're going to get me to vomit, right? And so we go at it back and forth, and, now I know that the villagers are looking at me, the white gringa, she's not doing what she's supposed to do, right? So here I am. I start, with the cups of, when he goes, faster, all right, if you don't vomit, stick your fingers down your throat. And he goes, if you don't vomit, then you're going to have an enema with this stuff. And I'm like, oh, my God. And so, he pushed me. like crazy. The next step was getting buried in the earth, and then the healing ceremonies, and it was extraordinary. It was astonishing what I had to do to get better. And later on in the book, I talk about drinking the ayahuasca, which I called the Holy Terror. Okay, and there's a certain point in the book where he starts having me work with him on other people, and there's some really extraordinary stories in here of some of the spirits that I saw, some of the healing work that he did. I saw him transform into a black jaguar. And the story continues on. I become his apprentice. And my family life breaks up. My husband obviously won't have anything else to do with me anymore. But, and he's terrified of me, basically. And so then I go back to Ecuador and do healings with him, because basically what had happened was the different spirits there married Carlos and I to do this healing work, and I was considered the ambassador from the north, and I had a mission, and that's all described in the book. And then later on, when we come to the United States and what it's like working with Americans and what it's like for him and what it's like working with the Native Americans, I mean, there would be 45 or more people sick. And it was very heavy-duty stuff. Like, we put the heroin addicts one place. We put the people with heart problems another place. We put the people, diabetics, in another place. And, we would work on people till 11 or 12 in the morning. And there are lots of healing stories where people get healed in the book. And there's a lot about what it's like to be in the jungle. There's a lot to tell about the Shuar Indians, who I was with, that were known as the original head shrinkers of the Amazon. They're a warrior tribe. And that's a little bit about what Black Smoke is about.
I think if it was me, first time I met them, measure my head before I go to bed and again in the morning.
Yeah, and then you find it the size of a baseball if they get you, okay?
Well, here's a funny thing, though. Here in Houston, Texas, they used to have a fun, center, whatever you want to call it, with the roller coaster and all of that good stuff there. And one of the attractions in it was called the River of No Return. And they had displays up on the side of the banks, of little heads on tiki poles, and the guide would go about talking about how they used to really shrink heads there and all that.
Oh, yeah, well, I was with them, okay, and I've seen shrunken heads, and there's some stuff about that in the book. Yeah.
Well, one of the things that's important to me, since we're getting down to about 12 minutes, is that you get all the information out that you want, that's important to you to get out there. What would you like to say about the books we haven't already talked about, either one or both?
What I would like to say is that, what I'd like to say, I think it's important for people to read these books that are interested in, I'm not even going to call it alternative healing. It's basically a magical process where you go into the archetypal world and you're healed by something greater than what we see with our everyday eyes. On my website, people can read some of the books, parts of the books. They can see some interviews that I've done. There's some sound of Carlos the healer as he is singing some of the ritual songs that he does for healing, because the song itself brings the spirit down. So you can hear some of that. I've certainly taken many groups to work with him for healing. Right now I don't have a group schedule, but you can take a look at that if you're interested in going to work with this particular healer and with me. I do healing work myself, and I do consultations for people that are having a huge problem with the medical establishment in so far that they're overwhelmed. And what can they do? So I have no medical background myself, but because I've had a serious disease, and I've spoken with a lot of other people with serious diseases, sometimes I can help people if they're interested in that. So for me, the most important thing is that people get spiritually aligned for what they need in all senses of the word, and that they are able to take another kind of healing that may save their lives. All the healers that I work with are not God. They can take you as far as your life force and purpose is to be on the earth, but they can make people feel better. They can take pain away. They can open you up spiritually so that you have a better balance and equilibrium in your life. And that's basically what is important to me, my spiritual progress and helping others, that they reveal to themselves the best way that they can live.
So this is really largely about energy healing and balancing your energy and your chakras and stuff like that?
I don't even talk about that kind of thing necessarily. It certainly would do that because we all are spiritual beings, so we all have these different energy centers in us. We also have psychic centers in us so that we can see without our physical eyes if we develop that. Everybody can do it because it's in our bodies. And this is one thing that I train myself all the time for more intuition, to be able to hear spirits, see them, that kind of thing. And this is only for knowledge and for understanding that we are more than our physical bodies, because we're spiritual beings, and our real life should be healthy, happy, and peaceful, and at ease with one another. That's the nature of looking towards our wholeness, right? So yes, there are chakras and energy centers. I don't really call them chakras, but I understand what that means. Everybody has a different name for these kind of things. But those are also, almost like your umbilical cord to the spirit, to the spiritual world, or to heaven, or however you want to make that determination.
Okay. So then it would be a little bit different, but maybe not a lot.
Yeah, I suppose so. I don't know. I don't know. When you're in the jungle or with somebody, they don't go, "Hey, this is your second chakra." They just they're just there, and they open up what needs to be open for you, and they heal what needs to be healed. So, the idea of a definition when you're in a healing situation is not there, really. You observe, you learn by observing and working along with the person.
And do they have meetings in the States very often?
No, that's why I go to other countries. No, because most of them are not, they're poor people by our standards. They don't own mortgages. They've got, jungle sheds, basically, and our government will not let them in because they think they all want to become immigrants. They don't have a social status that would be equitable to what we have here, so they don't get in. And John of God can come in, but I think there was a point, 5 or 6 years ago where they weren't going to let him in, okay? So most, I'd say 99.9% of healers that might want to come here and that we would benefit from would not be allowed in the country.
Well, that's kind of sad.
It's very sad, and I have a lot of experience with this because I've done, I've tried to get a lot of people here, and it's a no. Okay. That's how it is. And they don't want to stay here, believe me. I mean, that it's just too different from their world. It just really is.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. So, do you have any last-minute thoughts for us?
Love everybody. Take care of yourselves. Be good to your children. No, I don't know. I'm just nice to talk to you. I'd like to hear your last-minute thoughts.
Well, I was thinking it sure would be nice if people could have a more open mind to, well, you hesitate to use the term, but for me, I can't think of another term offhand. Alternative methods of healing. I mean, I've had other people on my show like Carl O'Helvey. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. And he's a nurse or an ex-nurse, and he's more or less retired now. He's up in his 80s, but about 50 years ago, he was diagnosed with cancer, and he used some herbal cures and diet changes and stuff like that. And the cancer disappeared without any other radiation or chemo. And, he's kind of like you. He doesn't recommend that everybody just say, bye-bye, doctor, I'm going to go on my own little merry way. He's saying these are things that you could do in addition. And if they're working, hey, great. And if they're not, you haven't lost anything, in other words.
True enough. When you use herbs, I mean, you have your spiritual body, your psychic body, and your soul body. And each one of those, so the people that I'm working with are working on the soul level. And
right, and there's the apothecary works with the herbs,
right,
which GNC would be our modern-day apothecary, I think.
Exactly. So some of the people that are working in the spirit world or the soul world also will give you herbs because they know that sometimes, like João, there was one person that went there and he said, get the chemo now because what I have to do for you is going to take longer and you're not going to live. And get that and then come back and we'll finish it off. Because some things, if you get cut, you don't go to the soul, okay? You go to the doctor and get it stitched. There's just different levels, and they should all be looked at and appreciated. And do them all, especially if you need to be well.
And if what the doctors is doing is not working, what do you have to lose?
Well, or look at it as, I have everything to gain.
Well, that's true.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, alrighty then. Once again, everybody, I'd like to remind you that her website is www.blacksmokethebook.com. This has been Margaret De Wys. We've been talking about her book, Ecstatic Healing, and we touched a little bit on her other book, Black Smoke. You can find information on both of them at her website. Also, if y'all come back tomorrow, the next day, I will have moved this to the archives to make room for my next show that's coming up. And I'll have a link over there to her website, and I'm going to have it also an affiliate link over to Amazon where you can buy the book set. If you're going to purchase the book, I'd appreciate it if you do it by linking to it from my book over to Amazon. That way I get a commission for it if you'll pardon my shameless plug. Don't forget, everybody, tomorrow I'm going to be live at www.freedomsleeps.com. That's Revolution Radio. And I'm going to be talking to Daryl Storer, and he's got a book out called The Key of the Storm. And this is a book that's got to do with different facets of his paranormal experiences that he would like to share with us. Now, the shows over at Revolution Radio are 2-hour shows, so get you a cup of coffee, a glass of tea, whatever you need to keep you occupied while you're listening to the show. And hopefully we'll see you over there then. In the meantime, y'all have a good night, and we'll see you later.
Bye, Roy.